Ninjas. Text by Adele Broadbent. Illustrations by Wayne Hovers. Matt is enjoying jiu-jitsu camp, making friends and having fun. Stealth training is particularly cool. The only problem is Brad, a boy who teases him. Ninjas. Text by Adele Broadbent. Illustrations by Wayne Hovers. Chapter 1. Matt stared out of the car window at brown paddocks. They had been driving for ages. "It's nice out here in the country, don't you think?" said Mum, smiling from the front seat. Matt shrugged. "Just what you need," said Dad. "What did the flyer say?" BMX bikes, volleyball, football, an obstacle course, and of course, all that jiu-jitsu training you'll be doing. Matt slumped down in his seat. How did he let them talk him into it? A whole weekend with a bunch of kids he didn't know, doing who knows what. He had to admit he did like the jiu-jitsu club he had just joined, but to spend a whole weekend with them? Too much. "Here it is," said Dad, slowing down. Camp Gravel. He turned up a dirt road. Matt groaned. If the rickety sign was anything to go by, Camp Gravel was going to be pretty basic. The road soon narrowed and entered a shady glade of trees. Almost as suddenly as they entered, they came through the other side into a tree-lined car park, brimming with cars, kids, bags, and parents. Matt peered through the windscreen, trying to spot any familiar faces from his club. He had only been to a couple of lessons and didn't know anyone yet. Dad pulled in beside the other cars. "Okay, Matt, climb out." Matt slowly climbed from the car, still searching faces. No one from his club seemed to be there. He dragged his bag from the back seat and quickly caught the sleeping bag Dad lobbed at him from the boot. "Good reflexes," came a voice from behind him. "You'll make an excellent black belt one day." Matt blushed. "Hi, Sensei." Matt's instructor put his fingers to his mouth and whistled. Matt winced, his hands full, unable to plug his ears. Kids came running from all directions, gathering in a rough semicircle in front of Sensei. "Okay, everyone," said Sensei. "Nice to see you all here. First thing we're going to do is meet the camp organisers and get you divided up into groups for your cabins." While he talked about the rules and regulations of the camp, Matt could feel a dozen sets of eyes probing him. He shuffled sideways, shyly, away from his instructor and all the other kids' gazes. When Sensei finished speaking, he grinned over at Matt and swung a pack up onto his shoulder. "Follow me," he said, striding off towards the camp buildings. Matt hesitated at first, watching the other kids wave to their parents and follow Sensei. When he turned back to his mum and dad, they were already moving towards the car. "Off you go," called Dad. "You'll have a ball. We'll see you Sunday," Mum waved. "Bye, hun." Matt watched as they drove off back down the dirt road. When he turned back, everyone was gone. Chapter 2. After one last look down the drive, Matt snatched up his pack and struggled across the car park with his gear. Following the sound of laughter and voices, he found the others in a wide grassy area, ringed by cabins and larger buildings. He jumped as something struck his side, then rubbed his hip, scanning the ground for what hit him. "Hey!" came a shout. "Chuck back my frisbee, would ya?" A tall, wiry boy waved from across the grass. When Matt threw the frisbee back, the boy called, "Call that a throw? My grandmother can throw harder than that." Matt ignored the boy's laughter and searched for familiar faces again. There! A boy from his club. Was his name Ben? And two girls over by the hall too. Ben smiled as Matt approached. "Hi." "Hi," said Matt. "This place seems pretty cool, huh?" "Yeah, it looks okay," said Matt, relieved to find someone he knew. Well, sort of knew. Sensei's sharp whistle suddenly pierced the air, grabbing everyone's attention. "Leave your gear out here," he instructed. "They're ready for us now. Remember your focus, people, and listen carefully to our hosts." Matt squeezed in through the hall doors with the others. When Sensei came in, he waved them all to sit on the floor, and then shook hands with a man and a woman. "Quiet, please," he called. The excited chatter dropped to a murmur. "Welcome, everyone," said the woman with a smile. "It's great to have you here. My name is Wendy, and this is Grant." "Hi, Wendy." "Hi, Grant," chorused 24 voices. The kids listened as Wendy and Grant talked about how the camp was run and the rules. "They're not really rules," said Wendy. "They're guidelines, so you stay safe while you are here." At Grant's frown, she added with a grin, "So if you stay within the camp boundaries and off our newly dug garden, Grant won't get mad and chase you around the camp." Everyone laughed at the grouchy face Grant made at them. "Now let's get you settled into groups," she smiled over at Sensei. "How would you like them divided up?" Groups instantly formed as friends shuffled together across the hall floor. Matt followed Ben hesitantly into a small group who all smiled as he joined them. Sensei moved through the groups, rearranging some amid a few quiet moans and groans. When he reached Matt's group and looked like he was going to move Ben, he must have seen Matt's face. "All right, this group looks okay. Actually, I think we need one more here." He scanned the room. "Brad," he called to the far corner. "Can you join this group, please?" At first, Matt didn't understand why the others in his group groaned. Then he saw the tall boy who had had the frisbee. Sensei waited for him. "I want you to set an example, Brad. You're the oldest in this group and the highest ranked." "Yes, Sensei," Brad said politely. As soon as Sensei had moved on to the next group, Brad turned. He sneered at Matt. "Hello, Grandma." Chapter 3. "Please sit down in your groups," said Sensei. When they got settled, he continued. "Each cabin will have a parent assigned to it. You need to choose a cabin leader, and someone from each group needs to volunteer to be the cabin runner. That's someone to do jobs and run messages for the parent in their cabin, and help other adults and me when we need you." The hall came alive again with a low buzz as leaders were chosen. Brad looked around at their group. "You heard Sensei. I'm the highest ranked. I should be cabin leader. Okay by you, Grandma?" Matt growled. "My name is Matt." "Whatever. Thanks for your name. I'm volunteering you for the cabin runner." He leapt to his feet, waving at Sensei. The parent assigned to their cabin was one of the dads, Mr. Gibbs. Matt hoped he wouldn't have too many jobs for him. When his group reached their cabin, they each claimed bunks by throwing their gear on them. Matt noticed Brad had the top bunk right by the door, so he made sure he was as far away as possible. Avoiding Brad at dinner, Matt chatted with Ben and got to know the other kids at his table. After clean-up and spending time on the trampolines and rope swings around the camp, he was glad his parents had talked him into coming, until he went to bed. With everyone snuggled into their sleeping bags, they chatted for ages. "Come on, guys, it's 11, grumbled Mr. Gibbs from his bunk. "Lights out, time to go to sleep." The cabin fell into darkness, the only light coming from a weak bulb outside with its fan club of moths. After a few giggles and rustling of sleeping bags, the cabin was silent. "Psst, psst," hissed through the darkness. "What?" "Give me your torch. My batteries are dead." "No, Brad." "Oh, come on." Silence. "Psst. Grandma!" Matt groaned at the nickname. "Grandma, got a spare torch?" Matt ignored him and rolled over to face the wall. "Brad, go to sleep," ordered Mr. Gibbs. "Can't," mumbled Brad. Matt heard feet hit the floor. "I'm going to the bathroom," whispered Brad. By the time Brad banged back into the cabin, Mr. Gibbs was snoring. "What do you think?" hissed Brad. "Shall we put a tennis ball in his mouth?" His only reply was a couple of grumbles. "Be quiet, Brad. Go to bed." "Oh yeah, Grandma, I nearly forgot," said Brad. "Sensei wants you in the kitchen." Matt wriggled away from the poke in his back. "Come on, you're cabin runner, remember?" Brad poked him again. "He wants to see you." Not sure whether to believe Brad or not, Matt pushed out of his sleeping bag and slipped down off his bunk. Brad looked serious enough, but why would Sensei want him now? The kitchen was empty. So was the hall and the games room, and Sensei's cabin was in darkness. Matt trudged back to the cabin, fuming at the smirk on Brad's face. He climbed back into his sleeping bag. A torch blasted his face. "So, did you find him?" asked Brad innocently. Matt wondered who'd given up their torch while he was out looking for Sensei. "Yes, I did, thanks," he lied. "He's been showing me some new advanced moves. He says I'm a natural." Matt smiled when the light suddenly moved away, bouncing across the cabin ceiling. Chapter 4. Clang, clang, clang. "Come on, sleepy heads. We're off for a morning run," cried Sensei. "Oh no! What time is it?" came another groan from under a pillow. "It's too early." Clang, clang, clang. The noise echoed around the cabin. Matt stuck his head out of his sleeping bag to see Sensei banging on a huge pot with a ladle. "I want everyone outside in 2 minutes," Sensei laughed as he left the cabin. "You heard him, boys," said Mr. Gibbs. "Up and at 'em." Matt couldn't help smiling. Mr. Gibbs' head looked like it had exploded, with hair sticking out everywhere. To Matt's surprise, Brad was the first to slip down from his bunk. But he looked worse than Mr. Gibbs. His eyes were puffy and bloodshot, like he'd hardly slept at all. "You heard them," said Brad. "Let's go, guys." In minutes they were dressed and outside, reluctantly pulling on their runners, ready for a run. Sensei led them out through the car park and down the dusty dirt road. Hot and sweaty on their return, Brad shot past. "Come on, Matthew," he said. "Not Matthew," began Matt. Forget it, he thought. At least it was better than being called Grandma. Brad seemed to be a different person at breakfast. He'd lost his sneer and didn't make any smart remarks. Matt shrugged. Maybe they had just got off to a bad start. "Okay, everyone," said Sensei after breakfast clean-up. "We have a challenge for you this morning. Grant is going to show us the Camp Gravel obstacle course. Don't forget your sunscreen, hats and runners." Some kids traded worried looks, and others grinned and boasted about how well they would do. Matt rolled his eyes when Brad's boast was louder than everyone else's. The bragging continued when they followed Sensei across a paddock of knee-high grass. Matt stared when Ben began wiping his eyes and sniffing. "What's the matter, Ben? It won't be that bad." Ben laughed and let out an enormous sneeze. "I'm not crying, Matt. I've got an allergy to this long grass." With another giant sneeze, he staggered in the grass. Brad bounded past. "Hope you're better at this than you are at throwing, Grandma." "Ignore him," said Ben, sneezing again. When the stragglers caught up and they had all assembled beneath huge shady trees, Grant motioned them to sit down. "Behind me is the Camp Gravel obstacle course. It is made up of 3 parts. There is the rope climb, which is about balance. There is a rails and poles course, which is also about balance. But this part of the challenge also involves learning to trust and help others." Wiping his streaming eyes, Ben gave Matt a puzzled look. Grant pointed to the left. "And over there is the 3rd part of the course, the time trial. A series of obstacles stretched out across the paddock." Matt nudged Ben and whispered, "I'll race you." Ben returned his grin. Once the kids had split into 3 groups, each group moved to its first challenge. Encouraging each other, Matt and Ben completed the rope course, laughing each time Ben sneezed and nearly wobbled off. Matt beat Ben on the time trial challenge, but only by seconds. At the finish line, Ben punched Matt on his shoulder. "You only beat me because I couldn't stop sneezing." Teasing each other, they followed their cabin group over to the final challenge. Chapter 5. Sensei was in charge of the rails and poles course. Matt took a closer look. It was made up of wooden rails narrower than his foot, which were nailed across poles of different heights. There were wider and wider gaps between the poles. At the start, a plank formed a ramp up to a rail about chest height. "Come in close, everyone," said Sensei. "This is an important part of your training. This course helps to improve not only your balance, but also your focus. You can achieve almost anything if you focus on it hard enough. Some of you may find it easy, some a little more difficult. So this is where we need to help each other by giving a steadying hand if someone needs it. This is not a race, understand?" "Yes, Sensei," said the group. "Who wants to go first?" Matt wasn't surprised when Brad leapt up. They all watched in awe as he strode up the narrow wooden ramp onto the first rail. He walked across it confidently, only stopping for a second before stepping across the gap or stepping down to a lower rail. Almost effortlessly he stretched down to step onto a seesaw log, walking up and balancing on the top, then down the other side as it lowered with his weight. The final part was a log hung by chains between 2 trees. He ran along the top like a cat and sprang off the end. "Easy, Sensei." "Thanks, Brad," said Sensei. "Who's next?" A line quickly formed at the start of the course. Most kids weren't as nimble as Brad, and some didn't even reach the first gap in the rail. "Remember to ask for help if you need it," said Sensei. "This is about learning to be part of a team. We are helping everyone achieve this, not just ourselves." Ben went before Matt, but even with someone on each side of the first gap to help him step across, He lost his balance every time he sneezed. Matt approached the course, still laughing at the faces Ben made each time he wobbled off. Slowly, Matt walked up the ramp to the rail. It was a lot higher than it looked from the ground. Inching his way along the rail, he reached the first gap. "It's easy, Grandma," cried Brad. Matt suddenly broke out in a sweat. He wiped his hands down his pants and lifted his foot to step across. He couldn't reach. Again he tried, but it was like his leg had shrunk. "It's too far," he whispered to himself. "Put your weight forward a little," said one of the parents who were standing next to the rail. "Here," he said, "hold my hand." Surprised at his sudden fear, Matt froze. "It's too high." "Just try it. You'll be fine," soothed the dad. "Yeah, Grandma," called Brad from behind the swinging log. Sensei finished helping someone across the seesaw and came over. "Brad, come and help Matt, please." Matt groaned. Wasn't it bad enough that he couldn't get across the first gap without having Brad come even closer to watch? Brad put up his hand so Matt could steady himself. Matt gritted his teeth, ignoring Brad's grin, and tried again. He couldn't do it. Another glance at Brad and he tried again. Leaning forward, he gripped Brad's hand hard and stepped out across the gap. His toes touched the next rail and, with a gasp of relief, he lunged across. Quickly dropping Brad's hand, he crossed the next gap with only a parent's help. When he saw Brad still watching, he began inching along on his own again, his heart banging in his chest. His first attempt at the seesaw log was too fast, and he had to jump down. Another couple of times, and still he slipped off. He ran around to the bottom and tried again. This time even slower. Brad appeared beside him. "Grandma, I think I'll change your name to Snail." Blocking out everything but the movement of his feet on the tipping log, Matt made it to the other end of the seesaw. "Well done, Matt," called Sensei. "You see, everyone? Matt used all his focus to finish the course. Sometimes you will come across something that is uncomfortable or even frightening. If you concentrate and focus hard enough, you can defeat that fear." Matt glanced across at Brad, expecting to see him sneer. But Brad was staring at the ground with a strange look on his face. Chapter 6. Back at camp, Matt, as a cabin runner, was sent to get a cold drink for the cabin parent, and then he helped set up for lunch. Over pizza, fruit, and rolls, Matt talked with the other kids at his table about their challenges that morning. Most of them had struggled with something along the way, and all laughed along with Ben about his sneezing around the courses. Matt caught Brad looking over from his table and remembered the strange look on Brad's face. Why had he looked so worried? After lunch, they spent their free time on the BMXs, trampolines, and rope swings. The familiar piercing whistle brought them all running back to the main compound, where the teachers and parents waited with more cold drinks. "This afternoon we are ninja training," said Sensei while they drank. "Stick defence, spear throwing, and learning some new routines and moves." Matt and Ben grinned over their paper cups. Again, they split up into groups. Matt was relieved that Brad followed Sensei to spear throwing. A few hours later, weary and hot from their training, Matt trudged back to his cabin with Ben and 3 others. Pulling their shoes off, they flopped down on their bunks. "That was awesome," mumbled Ben from his bunk. "Sure was," said Matt. Before long, they were hanging over the sides of their bunks, telling jokes and talking about the afternoon. "I thought we'd be training all day and all night," said Jack, the youngest in their cabin. But it's been cool doing lots of other stuff as well. Matt remembered his car trip out to Camp Gravel. He grinned to himself, glad that his parents had ignored his pleas to turn back home. It was great so far, and who knew what Sensei had planned for them next? Just as he was going to ask if the others knew, the cabin door banged open. "Should have guessed I'd find you guys in here," said Brad. "All having an afternoon nap, are you?" Before anyone could object, he sauntered over to Matt. "And you too, Grandma. Can't hack the pace, huh?" Seething, Matt leapt down off his bunk. "Just remember, Grandma," said Brad, "I'm a greenbelt. You're just a..." A pillow flew through the air, hitting Brad in the face. Within seconds, he was bombarded with pillows and clothes, and even a couple of shoes. "Hey, stop it! I'm the cabin captain," he cried. When another shoe bounced off his elbow, he dodged and dived his way to the door. The cabin filled with laughter. "I've been wanting to do that for ages," said Jack. "Did you see his face?" said Ben. "I don't think he'll be back for a while." "Thanks, guys," said Matt. Brad avoided them all afternoon, and at dinner time he sat glaring at them from another table. "Better watch out, Matt," warned Ben. "Brad sure looks mad, and he's still the cabin captain. Who knows what he's planning?" Chapter 7. Matt stayed wary, but Brad did nothing. When they ended up in line together for dessert, Brad was silent. He even stopped giving Matt evil stares and looked worried again. Matt shrugged and rejoined his table. The boys were deciding whether to play a game of volleyball or football after dinner. Brad remained in the kitchen when they raced off outside again to the volleyball court, all eager to make the most of the daylight. "Come on, Ben, hurry up and serve," yelled Jack from the other side of the net. Just as Ben struck the ball, a scream sliced the air. "Yikes! What was that?" The ball sailed over the net, just missing Jack, who stood staring in the direction of the scream. "Let's find out," cried Ben, running down the path to the main compound. They pounded through the trees and saw a girl being comforted by a parent. "Oh, it's just Alice," groaned Ben. "She probably saw a spider in her cabin." Another girl came running across the grass. "Something tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around, but there was nothing there." "The same thing happened to me," said Alice, "except I saw something or someone." She wiped her eyes, "all in black outside my cabin." More people were gathering around because of the commotion. What did it look like? How big was it? "Are you sure, Alice?" asked the parent. "It's getting dark. It might have been a shadow." "Shadows don't run away," said Alice with a sniff. "What's going on?" came a voice from behind them. Sensei pushed through the small crowd. "Are you all right?" A dozen voices blurted out the story to Sensei, while Alice just nodded. Just then, an instructor looked up. She frowned. "I think I just saw something." She pointed beyond the boundary fence. "Someone ran between those trees." Everyone spun around and stared. "Look, there!" Matt stared into the thickening darkness, even blacker among the trees. Shapes danced across his imagination. "There!" cried the instructor again, pointing into the dark. Sensei nodded and slowly turned to face them. "It sounds weird, but I think we have a ninja in camp." Chapter 8. "No way!" cried Ben at the front of the growing crowd. "Oh yes, Ben," replied Sensei. "We'll have to use all our skills and focus against him." "Who knows?" Sensei looked around at the other instructors. There might be more than one. Matt stared at Sensei, then around at the other kids who all looked as stunned as he felt. Checking the parents' faces for any sign it might be a joke, his mind spun. Was this for real? But Sensei looked like he meant business as he strode over into the light streaming out of the kitchen. Everyone followed, nervously looking out into the darkness. "Okay, everyone," called Sensei. "Please assemble into your cabin groups behind your cabin leader. Do not go anywhere without your cabin parent. Hurry up," he urged. Within minutes, they were lined up neatly alongside the kitchen. "Cabin 4, where's your captain?" asked Sensei. "I don't know, Sensei," said Ben. "I haven't seen him since dinner time." "Who's your cabin runner?" Matt put up his hand. "Matt, go and check your cabin, please." "Oh, no need." Here he is now. Brad appeared, trailing behind Mr. Gibbs. "Guess who I found in the kitchen? He was helping out the camp staff, I believe." "Thank you, Brad," said Sensei. "But your cabin needs you now." "Yes, Sensei," muttered Brad, looking back into the light of the kitchen. "Okay, is everyone accounted for?" "Yes, Sensei." "This is a good opportunity for your stealth training. You need to stay together. Do not stray from your group for any reason. And stay as silent as possible while you track our camp visitor. Your cabin parent and captain will be in charge." Matt glanced over at Brad, expecting to see a smug look on his face. But Brad looked just as freaked out as some of the younger kids. Matt nudged Ben, nodding at Brad. "Some captain," said Ben with a giggle. Despite the cool night air, Matt's hands were sweaty and the hairs on the back of his neck prickled as they ventured out into the dark. Suddenly Ben sneezed. "Shh," hissed Mr. Gibbs. Giggles broke the tension for a minute. "Come on, guys," whispered Mr. Gibbs. "You can't sneak up on anyone unless you're very quiet." Ben held his nose as they crept around behind the kitchen block. It was getting darker and darker. Matt couldn't make out the features on the faces around him. Someone bumped into him from behind. He jumped, holding his breath. "It's only me," hissed Ben. "Not scared, are you?" Matt couldn't see Ben's grin, but he heard it in his voice. He nudged him back. "Of course not." Light trickled from somewhere deep in the kitchen block, just enough for Matt to see Mr. Gibbs motioning for them to stop. He pointed at the ground and crouched on the path facing a section of trees and bushes. They all squatted down close together, staring into the bushes. Matt peered around at the others, shadows fingering their faces. Brad looked edgier than all of them put together, constantly glancing back. Voices and cries from the other groups rang out across the camp. "Why don't we look somewhere else?" asked Ben. "There's nothing happening here." There were mumbles of agreement. "Stealth means keeping still, staying silent," whispered Mr. Gibbs. "Yeah, but," began Ben. A stick snapped in the bushes. Chapter 9. Matt's heart pounded in his chest. Jack grabbed his hand. He gazed up at Matt with huge eyes, then let go again, searching for Mr. Gibbs' hand. A shape emerged from the bushes further down the path. "Achoo!" sneezed Ben. The figure spun round to face them. "Get him!" cried Ben, bolting down the path. Without a thought, Matt ran too, blindly pounding after Ben and the others, all yelling at the top of their voices. "Ah!" The shape turned and fled. Gravel crunched under the children's feet when they reached the drive, and security lights flicked on all over the car park. Someone dressed in black robes and masked by a black hood darted off to the left, over the new gardens and the boundary fence. Matt and Ben skidded to a stop at the edge of the gardens, grinning at each other. Ben grabbed Matt's arm. "Did you see that?" He spun around to Mr. Gibbs, who puffed across the car park behind them. "Did you see? We nearly caught him." Mr. Gibbs shook his head while he tried to catch his breath. "I'm sorry, guys. I didn't see anyone. I was checking on a couple of the others." He glanced over his shoulder. Jack stood crying under the security lights with two other boys. They all looked as frightened as deer caught in headlights. Matt's eyebrows shot up. One of the boys was Brad. Sensei's whistle reached out to them across the darkness. With one last look after the ninja, they raced back to the main compound, eager to tell everyone what they'd done. They quickly joined the other groups who were pointing into the darkness and chattering about what they had seen. A girl tugged on Matt's sleeve. "Did you see him? We saw him over there, in between our cabins. Then he disappeared." Matt looked back over to where she pointed and saw Brad and Jack going into the lighted kitchen with Mr. Gibbs. They disappeared inside and Mr. Gibbs came back. He caught the look on Matt's face. Thinking he was worried, he patted Matt's shoulder. "Don't worry about Brad, mate." He leaned closer, whispering, "He's not too fond of the dark." Matt's jaw dropped. "Brad? Scared of the dark?" That explained all the fuss with the torches the night before, and the look on his face when Sensei talked about fighting your fears at the Rails and Poles course. "Wait until I tell Ben," thought Matt with a grin. Chapter 10. Attention! "Yes, Sensei," everyone cried, snapping to attention. "Did you enjoy your stealth training?" "Yes, Sensei." Voices tripped over each other, telling Sensei what they'd seen and heard out in the darkness. He nodded, smiling at them all. "I hear one group got very close to a real ninja." Matt felt a jab in his back. "We were pretty fast, huh?" Ben threw up his arm, calling out, "We nearly caught him." But he was drowned out by a dozen other voices clamouring for Sensei to hear their stories. Ben shrugged, grinning back at Matt and their group. "Well, you would get a surprise if you did catch him," cried Sensei. He stepped back and knocked on the cabin door behind him. Silence slid over the compound. A figure stepped from the shadows of the cabin and into the soft light. He was robed entirely in black, from his hood with narrow rectangular eye holes to the black runners on his feet. Just as he reached to remove his hood, a girl in the front row said, "I know those shoes." Matt gasped. Sensei Glenn! He was one of the advanced teachers at the club. Matt had met him once. Sensei Glenn beamed at them. "You were awesome, boys and girls. Some groups were so quiet it was hard to work out where you were." "I knew it was you," said a boy at the front. "I got really close to you over by the hall block. I could tell by the way you flipped into the animal enclosure. I've seen you do that move before." Sensei Glenn patted him on the shoulder. "You are fast. You nearly caught me." "What about us?" cried Ben. "We got really close around by the car park. Hope you don't get into trouble with Grant for running through his garden." Matt's cabin group laughed, but Sensei Glenn looked puzzled. "Where did you say?" Ben pointed back over towards the car park. "You know, over there. You shot across the garden, then over that high fence." Sensei Glenn shook his head with a smile. "Sorry, guys, but I think your stealth training needs more work. I never went over that side of the camp. And I haven't been stomping through any garden." Another shake of his head, and then he began answering other questions. Matt turned to Ben, who returned his frown. Chapter 11. Still confused after supper about what Sensei Glenn had said, Matt and Ben dawdled back to their cabin. When Matt saw Brad trailing behind Mr. Gibbs from the bathrooms, he suddenly remembered his secret. "Hey Ben, guess what?" said Matt. Ben shook his head, muttering to himself, "We didn't imagine it. I know we didn't. We were so close we could have nearly touched him." "Ben?" Matt said again. Ben, deep in thought, still didn't seem to hear. By the time they reached their cabin, he had a dozen questions for the others. Matt grabbed his pyjamas, soap and toothbrush, thinking he'd tell Ben later. As he left the cabin, Brad arrived. Matt's smile slipped from his face when he caught Brad's look. From a tiny shake of Brad's head, Matt knew he was pleading with him not to tell his secret. He turned away, heading for the showers. By the time Matt returned, Brad was snuggled down in his sleeping bag facing the wall. Ben lay on his bunk staring into space, still looking puzzled. The others seemed to have forgotten all about it, telling jokes from their bunks. Matt hung down over his bunk. "Hey, Ben! Ben!" "Yeah," said Ben absently, still looking at the ceiling. A twitch from Brad's bunk caught Matt's eye. Brad's sleeping bag scrunched up a little more. "Who's had a good time?" Mr. Gibbs suddenly called from his bunk. A chorus of "Me!" ricocheted around the cabin. "Learned some new moves? Made some new friends?" he asked. "Yeah," they all cried, launching pillows across the room. Brad lay silent. Matt sat up on his bunk. Mr. Gibbs was right. He had made some friends. In the beginning, I was scared, he thought. Matt glanced over at Brad, still as a rock in his sleeping bag. Brad might have been a jerk at first, but it didn't matter anymore. Matt smiled to himself. There's no way he's going to hassle me now that I know his secret. A foot from below nudged him in the back. "What were you going to tell me?" asked Ben. "Nothing," said Matt. Chapter 12. "Come on, Matt," said Ben the next morning. "It's pancakes for breakfast on the last day." "Coming." Matt was left alone in the cabin trying to tie his sleeping bag into a roll. Just as he tightened the buckle, the cabin door creaked open behind him. When he saw Brad, he turned back to his packing. "Thanks," Brad extended his hand. "Huh?" "Thanks for not saying anything," mumbled Brad. Matt shrugged and shook Brad's hand. "You're lucky I didn't," he said, remembering Brad's taunts. "Yeah, I know." "So why were you such a jerk?" "Dunno." Brad stared at the floor. The door swung open. "Come on, boys. Pancakes and golden syrup." With uneasy smiles, they raced after Mr. Gibbs. Standing at the back of the pancake line, Matt asked Brad the question that had niggled at him for hours. "So how come you're scared of the dark?" Brad shot a panicked look around them. "Shh!" When he saw that no one was listening, he mumbled, "I didn't think I was anymore. Not until I got to camp, anyway. I can't help it. And when that ninja jumped out of the bushes, it really freaked me out." Matt gave him a nod, his thoughts drifting back to what they saw in the dark. So even Brad saw something. By the time he'd got to the table, Ben was talking about it again, still puzzled at the mystery. "I've been thinking about it, Matt. I think that ninja must have left footprints in Grant's garden. Maybe he even left some black cloth on the fence. Let's check it out." Once they'd finished cleaning the cabins, Ben raced off to the car park, eager to look for clues. Matt, Jack, and Brad were close behind. They found Wendy planting new seedlings in the garden. "Hello, boys. Had a good time at Camp Gravel? Yes, thanks, they replied politely, quickly scanning the dirt for any footprints. Pity you weren't here earlier, she said. You could have helped me dig over this garden before I started planting. There were footprints right across to the fence. At their startled faces, she smiled. Oh, I'm not blaming any of you. These footprints were far too big for any of you kids. She scratched her head, leaving dirt in her hair. But I can't imagine why any of the adults would run across here. Ben nearly glowed. His grin was so wide. He tugged on Matt's sleeve. Come on. They raced back to the cabins, Ben still grinning. I told you, we did see something. Yeah, said Matt, feeling confused. But if it wasn't one of us, and it wasn't Sensei Glenn, then who was it? He leaned closer. Just then, Sensei appeared in the cabin doorway. Hi, boys. Seen any gardening ninjas today? He grinned. Ben turned to look at Sensei's smile. I think we need some more stealth training, he laughed.
Squawk the pig!
Yo ho, it's off the plank you go. Ya ha ha.
Type the word. Type a letter to start. Clue. A sickness that makes you itch or sneeze.
Ooh, try again. Pickle me parrots, matey. You can spell better than I. Well, I'll be a landlubber's lollipop. That was good. Ooh, storm a brewing. Try again. Swab the deck with me old red socks and try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Ooh, try again. Keep your wits about yer. Ahoy, matey. Fantastic spelling. Swab the deck with me old red socks and try again. Swab the deck with me old red socks and try again.
Try that word again. Click on Try Again. Clue. A sickness that makes you itch or sneeze.
Ahoy, matey. Pickle me, parrots. Shiver me, you can spell better than I. Great spelling. Well, I'll be a landlubber's lollipop. That was good. Well, I'll be a landlubber's lollipop.
Allergy.
That was good.
Well done. Click Next to get another word. Clue. Moving carefully so you are not seen or heard.
Ooh, storm a brewing. Try again. Shiver me timbers, matey. Great spelling. Pickle me parrots, matey. You can spell better than I. Ooh, try again. Ooh, storm a brewing. Try again. Ooh, try again. Swab the deck with your red socks and try again. Swab the deck with your red socks and try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Swab the deck with me old red socks and try again.
Try that word again. Click on Try Again. Clue.
Well,
moving carefully so you are not seen or heard.
That's me. Good. You can spell better than I. Keep your wits about yer. Swab the deck with me old red socks and try again. Matey. Fantastic spelling. Swab the deck with me. Keep your wits about you. Again. Storm a brewing. Try again. Try again. Try again. Storm a brewing. Try again. Keep your wits about you.
Bye-bye.
Oops! The word was stealth. Let's try another word. Click Next to get another word. Clue. Stay upright when it's easy to fall down.
Well, bury me boots in a cookie jar, matey. That was good. And Lover's Lollipop. That was Storm a brewing. Try again. Swab the deck with me old red socks. Try again. Try again. Swab the deck with me old red socks and try again. Try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Try again.
Bye-bye.
Try that word again. Click on Try Again. Stay upright when it's easy to fall down.
Sorry, matey. Try again. Storm a brewing. Try again. Keep your wits about you. Try again. Sorry, matey. Try again. Storm a brewing. Try again. Storm a brewing. Try again. Ahoy, matey. Fantastic spelling. Pickle me parrots, matey. You can spell better than I. Well, bury me boots in a cookie jar, matey. That was good.
Balance. Excellent. You saved the pirate. Type your name and click on Next. Make a newspaper. Make your own picture. Click on Help to watch a demonstration. Complete your ID by typing in your name. Click Next when you have finished. Set a date. Choose the month. Choose the day. Great, that's today's date. Type in a name for your newspaper. Click on a headline for your story. Jiu-Jitsu students learn balance and focus. Type your story. Type your story. Click Next when you've finished. Drag a picture for your story onto the newspaper front page. Click Next when you've finished. Write a caption or label for the picture. Check your newspaper carefully. If you want to make any changes, click on the Revise button beside the part you want to change. Otherwise, click on Publish to make your newspaper or play again.